Okay. We are recording. So I'll get started with introductions. My name is Jennifer Worlin. I'm an extension educator for the University of Idaho in Teton County, and our office is located in Driggs, Idaho. I want to give you a brief background about why we are doing these webinars. And a few years ago, I was approached by the Teton Valley Kitchen, which was a kitchen incubator that started in Driggs, Idaho, at the end of 2016. I joined Extension that year, and that 2017 year, they approached me. They wanted to get some support for education for the tenants at the kitchen. And they thought this could be a great partnership with Extension. So we did a series of in-person workshops for food entrepreneurs, both in 2017 and 18. Unfortunately, the kitchen did close at the end of 2017 for various reasons, mostly financial, but there was still a great demand for education around food entrepreneurship, business planning, food safety, all the topics that we're going to be discussing throughout this webinar series. Due to the tremendous feedback or positive feedback we had from the classes, we decided to take these classes online into a statewide webinar format. And so I'm very happy that we have extension educators throughout our state that are helping to facilitate these webinars for the next month or so. And we are so lucky that we have amazing speakers that are joining us today and being able to offer the great resources and information to you all today. So if you just started or just joined us today, please type your name in the chat box, your affiliation, and why you are here. The overview of our webinar series is that today's class, we will be starting with business planning and provide some resources for you on developing your business plan, getting your idea and your goals formulated. And then next week, we'll be discussing food safety and licensing. The third workshop's ingredient sourcing, analysis, and labeling. And then that final workshop is marketing and distribution. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to my colleague, Carrie Boone, who is an extension educator in Payette County. Before we get started, few webinar tips. To make sure that your webinar runs smoothly and you don't have as much interference with other programs, please close your other programs during today's webinar. You can also check your audio quality. If for some reason the computer audio is not working well, we do have a call-in number in that email that I sent to you yesterday. And if you don't have that handy, I'll look it up and I'll put it in the chat box. You can just message me if you need that. And then please wait till we have time for questions instead of interrupting during the presentation, simply because we are short on time, but we will have time to answer personal questions about your enterprises as we go through today's webinar. So I'm going to go through the next slide.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So I gave you a brief introduction about myself. Carrie Boone is my colleague, and she helped coordinate today's webinar. So we will have her take over. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today.
All right. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I just want to put a picture to our voices here. This is us. We've been coordinating this class, and we're looking forward to having you guys around for the next 3 classes after this. Today's class is focused on a recipe for success. So we're looking at how to develop your marketing plan. What are the tools that we can offer? And then also some guidelines and strategies for online social media marketing of your business. And so to get there, we've already made it through 1, 2, and then I think my next slide also has the topics, and then we'll have 2 different presenters. And then we'll finish with Q&A. We'll actually have Q&A between each of the topic presentations. And then we'll review the upcoming course topics, and then we will request your help with a survey for the webinar. We really value your feedback. So today's topics are being presented by some very experienced people in the business world. Andrew, I think he goes by Andy. I'll let him tell us. And then John Walker. They're from SCORE, which is a nonprofit association, and they do education for entrepreneurs and helping small businesses start, grow, and succeed. The SCORE organization itself is nationwide, but we have representatives from the Treasure Valley. They've been around here since the 1970s. And they are in collaboration. You might have heard of the Small Business Administration. So they sort of work hand in hand with that. And so they're really here to help small business owners with information, provide resources. They have templates and tools to assist you in developing your plans. And they also offer one-on-one mentoring and online workshops. And so I think, they'll give you the overview, and then they might suggest if you have further need to do one-on-one mentoring. And I believe that is free, and I'll let them sort of go over the details of that. And so with that, Andy, I will have you start here. So John, if you wanted to go ahead and share your presentation.
Yes, I will.
So we'll have John as sort of sharing, and then Andy's gonna speak with us, and then John will give us, well, Andy, we'll have, after you're done with Q&A, Andy, at the end of your presentation, we'll take a short 5-minute break. Give everyone a little bit of breathing room, and then we'll have John start up after that break. And then John will also have time for Q&A after his. So does that sound okay?
Yes.
Sounds fine.
Can you all see my slides?
I can see them.
I
All
can.
right.
And
Okay.
John, as you and I discussed, I'll be the one starting off the conversation. So we'll start with the first slide. And the first comment I want to make is thank you all for attending this presentation and trusting us with your time and interest. We know time is very valuable, and we appreciate the attendees essentially attending. Thank you for the university for sponsoring this and arranging this. We're going to do our best to perhaps to meet your expectations and perhaps exceed your expectations. And maybe we'll have a little bit of fun along the way. So John, can you go to the second slide? This is a longer version of who is talking. John Walker is at the moment running the slides, and you'll hear from him directly later. I'm the one kind of running the SCORE presentation. And to save time, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on John and myself and SCORE. You can find out about the organization. John, would you go to the next slide? This is a written version of what you just heard. There's much more information available on the website for treasurevalley-score.org or the nationalscore.org organization. And so I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time on talking about that, other than perhaps at the front end to say the major difference between what you hear from us and what the core value of working with SCORE and people associated with SCORE is the fact that we are available to answer the detailed questions at the individual level. This, by nature, for time purposes, is going to be a very high-level presentation. It will not answer detailed questions for specific businesses, which is almost impossible to do in a short period of time. But what has made SCORE successful and worthwhile to the country and the Treasure Valley for over 50 years is you can access individual mentors through the websites. You can have conversations, video meetings. Once upon a time, we used to do face-to-face mentoring sessions. You can schedule those and address your specific business questions and get them answered. So let me see where we're going from here. This is a longer version of why listen to SCORE mentors and subject matter experts. You can read that. I'm going to go off into the weeds for a few minutes. Earlier this morning, Carrie asked me if I could address labor shortages and other issues briefly. And since the presentation was already prepared, I'm going to talk for 2 minutes while you're looking at this slide about labor shortages. The fact of the matter is we have labor shortages in business across the country. We have materials and supply shortages that vary across the country. We have logistics shortages across the country. And there are a whole lot of reasons why all of those things have happened. But as best as we can tell from where we are in business, if you're not having any, you're lucky. There's no one single reason. There's no one single path. There's no one single magic bullet to solve the labor problem or the mechanics problems or the logistics problems that we're having. There are a lot of reasons for it, and solving them is individually business specific. And what I would encourage you to do is to get in touch with, reach out to a SCORE mentor through our websites and have individual conversations. We've all experienced all kinds of crazy things. A week ago, I went to my local Wells Fargo Bank branch, and the branch was closed, and the manager came out the side door and said the branch was closed, and the only thing that was working was the drive-through, was because they had no tellers. This past week, I wanted to go to Panera Bread Company, and lo and behold, their dining room was closed on Tuesday because they didn't have help to open it up. So there are a lot of people facing these kinds of things. There is no magic bullet. It's not going to end soon on some of the fronts. On the logistics and supply fronts, it's not going to end very quickly. The labor shortage may abate a little bit more rapidly, but we're going to be facing this for some time as we go forward. And the best thing you can do is to talk to a SCORE mentor and have them talk to you about possible solutions for your business, whether those solutions are reducing hours, changing schedules. I still run 4 businesses, and I can tell you that raising wages and paying bonuses as a method of getting sustainable help are not really working. They are short-term fixes. They are not long-term fixes. So talk to a mentor about your individual problems and get advice about things to do. And then, John, if I could get you to switch out of the your slides so that I can go live for a moment. Can we do that? I don't want to mess up. Okay. What do we have to do to see me on the presentation?
Can you go to your video icon at the bottom and do start?
Yeah, there we go.
We'll see you perfectly.
Okay. I know you're here for education and important things, but this is an interesting example of the question. This is huckleberry lemonade cocktail being produced by a specialty food company in Idaho. 44 North Distillery. And there's almost no product available in the marketplace. And the reason there's no product available in the marketplace is they can't get enough glass. They can produce all the product that they want, but with the supply chain disruptions, reducing glass coming from China, local people had to turn to US distributors, and the US distributors can't produce enough glass locally to meet the demand. So people like this company in the specialty food business are wrestling with the fact that they can make the product, but they can't get it to the stores because they can't get enough glass to package it. There are so many things like that going on in the marketplace that you really need to try to address individual questions and issues with a mentor, because there is no one magic bullet. There are all kinds of problems and you need to try and solve them individually. Okay, John, can we go back to the last slide that we were on? Can you go back one slide? Okay. So the reason we're here is most of the mentors in SCORE would say to people who are starting and running businesses, the fact that they found that creating and maintaining a living business plan is essential to long-term success. And there are things that we're going to talk about creating and maintaining a living business plan. Okay. And we'll get to that shortly, but I want to take another digression. Would you go to the next slide, John? Just for fun, if you're interested, we're going to start an actual live specialty food business online here today, but you can't tell anybody about it when it's revealed and when you start participating in it. So please remember that it's a secret just between the group of people who are on this presentation. Okay, John, can we go on to the next slide? Business plan. You've all heard it. It scares the bejesus out of lots of people. It's perhaps the most hated and misunderstood activity or device in operating a business. I'm not going to read all the verbiage for you. What I will tell you is it's pretty much a necessity for success. It's an absolute necessity for people looking to borrow significant amounts of money from either investors or third parties. Many of you have watched Shark Tank. The people who present the Shark Tank are expected to have business plans. There is no one-size-fits-all business plan. There are as many different devices, plans, schemes that are out there as there are stars in the sky. And so we're going to present a summary process for you that really works across anything that you would run across in terms of a business plan. But it's, in our experience, a necessity, a best practice for success, and it's an absolute necessity if you want to raise any significant amount of money from a third party or investors. So let's go on to the next slide. Oh, just go back a moment, John, because there's a line that comes in. You've all heard the famous line, if you're failing to plan and follow up, then you're probably planning to fail. There's a lot of truth to that behind a business. Okay, John, keep going. We tend to think of a business plan as a living entity. It's not a 200-page book that is written to put away, never to be used in day-to-day operations. If you do the business plan right and you keep it current as you are working the business, you will refer back to the plan and decisions and judgments that you made to make and take actions. And John will explain some of that when he's talking about marketing. So to start at the front end, at a very high top level view, all businesses exist and more importantly, continue to exist to solve a problem, meet a need, and fulfill a desire. Almost all business plans end up with some version of these four major categories. They usually end up with a mission statement. They usually end up with a customer definition. They end up with what we call fancy a value proposition, and almost always have financial model projections. The financial model projections shouldn't scare people who are looking at this and setting up a business, but the more money that you're looking for and that you will have to go borrow and convince people to give you, the more detailed financial projections will have to be. But all business plans end up with some combination of these four categories in them. Sometimes they're called a little bit differently, but if you understand mission, customers, value proposition, and financial model projections, no matter what business plan people throw at you, your local bank or credit union or investors, they will be looking for these four characteristics in your business plan. Okay, John. The first one, which is as critical as any of the others, is the mission or purpose of the business. What have you decided are the products and services that the business will be offering? Okay. It can be 2 sentences, it can be 20 sentences. The shorter, the better. Are you going to be making chocolate chip cookies? Are you going to be selling rugs? Are you going to be operating a food truck? The mission and purpose is, why are you going to exist as a business? And it's your call. It is important when you write these sentences down. And by the way, what I forgot to say was, it is important to write all these things down and keep them in front of yourselves so that you can go back and forth and test what you're doing against what you have written. It is important that once you write this down, that you do some research in the marketplace to make sure that you understand how what you are trying to do may or may not fit in the universe of competition and in the marketplace. By definition, the mission and purpose is unique to each business. Those of you who have farms with certain products understand what your products are, and you know how you fit in the niche of the farm marketplace and other people. If you're looking to expand, you need to write down what you think you want to expand into, and then test that thinking against what is going on competitively. Mission and purpose is a living statement. As you get smarter, you usually write these things on day 1 or day 50. As you get smarter about what's going to work, when you go through the next 3 steps, you go back and change this so that when you're done, the mission and purpose is really what you are doing. So let's keep going. Here we're going to have some fun. It's easy and nice and convenient for me and us to talk big picture kinds of things. But the question is, how do these categories and these items relate to what goes on in the real world? I chose to use the coffee business as a specialty food business that most of us understand to use these examples. So in terms of mission, and by the way, the coffee business was not a specialty food business 25 or 30 years ago. 25 or 30 years ago, there was coffee. There were no chains of Starbucks. There were no chains of Moxie Java or Dutch Brothers or a whole host of things. There was just coffee. And over the course of time, the coffee business evolved and became very much a specialty food business. If you go out to Starbucks documentation, and I've circled some things in red. They had a vision. Howard, the man who founded the company, he wanted to bring Italian coffee house tradition back to the United States. His vision and his mission was to create a conversation and a sense of community, a third place between home and work. To say Starbucks purchases and roasts high quality whole bean coffee is very true. It is the essence of what they do, but it hardly tells the whole story. And when you go down further, expect more than coffee. We're a neighborhood gathering place. You can see in this what the mission, go back to that for a second, John, thank you. Starbucks' mission is to provide interesting coffee in a neighborhood gathering place where you have space for conversation and community. That is their mission. And so now if you walk into a Starbucks store, you can decide whether or not you can see that mission being fulfilled. Because when they went through the rest of the analysis that we're going to go through, they decided that this was a niche, a specialty business that they could create, that they could sustain, that would be profitable. Let's go on to the next one. Dutch Brothers. There may not be Dutch Brothers everywhere in the market where people are attending. Dutch Brothers' mission, if you'll see the red box, they wanted to create the largest privately held drive-through coffee company. They weren't interested in creating a gathering place. They weren't interested in creating a place between home and work. They said clearly in their mission statement, we want to be the largest privately held drive-through coffee company. That's their specialty food niche. And now if you look at Dutch Brothers, as opposed to Starbucks or McDonald's, you can see, if you're familiar with Dutch Brothers, how they've executed that mission statement. They have drive-throughs on both sides of their kiosks. So they provide more drive-through capability, and you go there because you expect to get through faster because they have 2 lanes. They are not serving people sitting down. They are not working on that. That's their mission statement. That's what they've defined. So let's go on, John. Moxie Java is also a chain in the area, and it's a dedicated gourmet roaster. Our master roaster roasts our coffee in small batches with a fluid bed air roaster in their facility. Their specialty food niche is providing the coffee that they think emerges from this kind of product. And their entire lines of coffee are roasted in Garden City. That's their mission statement. Can you go ahead, John? What does McDonald's say about coffee? Not surprisingly, not much, because coffee is not a strategic part of the McDonald's specialty food mission. So when you go to McDonald's websites, you basically see they want to make food, better food for a healthier planet, high quality, safe. They, unlike Starbucks and the previous people that we looked at, in their mission statement is the word affordable. So part of their strategy in their specialty food product is to give a cost-effective coffee product, and it's less important for them to be very special in terms of coffee. Keep going, John. And then out of the crazies, many of you have heard of Krispy Kreme donuts. And so in the bottom right-hand side, Krispy Kreme is not transforming itself predominantly into a purveyor of coffee. they added coffee to their assortment, but it says it wants to be a donut store, yet it wants to be taken seriously when it comes to coffee. That's their version of very short-term, short view mission statements. So when you go and you're thinking about, for example, starting a specialty food coffee business, you look at what other people are doing, what they have said is their mission statement, and you say to yourself, how do I fit? If I wanted to start a specialty coffee food chain, where would my strength, where would I try and position myself, given that these people have identified these niches, and in some cases have been doing them for years or have a lot of money to do them or so forth. So you do a mission statement. Okay, next one. So today we have decided we're going to start a new specialty coffee business called Java Drone. And the mission and the purpose of Java Drone is to provide the best affordable coffee beverages to your personal location as fast as possible. So all the other people, you have to go to them for coffee. Java Drone is going to bring coffee to you. And I know some of you may be chuckling and laughing as you look at this, but that's part of the fun of this, and it's part of the fun of creating businesses. You get to go outside the normal boundaries of what has been done and dream. So is it possible to do this? Well, we'll come back and talk about it, but for the purposes of going through and defining a business plan, here's a new business, and here's a mission statement for it. And this mission statement, at least when it was done, there weren't nobody doing this. The question is, can this be a viable long-term business? So keep that in the back of your minds. And remember, this is our secret. We've just created this in this presentation, but I think it gives you an idea of how to think about missions and how missions have got to be unique, how they've got to fit in with competition, how they've got to fit in the marketplace. Okay, John. The second factor in developing a business plan is, okay, here's what I said I was going to do. Who's the customer? Who's going to buy the product? I'm developing a specialty food business, which by definition means not everyone will be a customer for that business. So who is the customer? Who am I going to target? Who am I going to appeal to? Who are the people who are going to give me money and buy my product? It's important to define this, particularly in the area that we live in the arena we live in these days, where information on customers is the key to where the Amazons and the Googles and the Facebooks and other people market. Okay, you need to be able to decide who the customer is that you're targeting so that you can assess your mission against that customer and against competition. And customer characteristic, age, demographics, income, residence, priorities, habits, etc. If you're selling to businesses on a wholesale level, there will be similar characteristics for businesses. Who does the business sell to? How do they sell? Is it compatible with how they want me to do business with them? This is also a written paragraph, and it's done in the initial stages of the business plan. John? So going back to our coffee shop conversation, I, for the sake of this presentation, chose to pick two different buckets of customers. And then once I picked the buckets of customers, I identified some characteristics of each of those customers. So I said, okay, the primary customers for my coffee shop, my specialty coffee shop business, are potentially 22-year-olds or 45-year-olds. And this is not meant to insult anybody at any age different from that. It was just a marker to put on a wall. And so then if I go through and put characteristics of those customers, what are the major characteristics of those customers? The 45-year-old will most likely be some kind of a college graduate, probably will live in the suburbs. They may have developed a taste for the specialty coffee that Moxie Java does, or that is done at Dutch Brothers. The 22-year-old may only be interested at that stage in their life in basic coffee. What are they using it for? It's a beverage. The 45-year-old may want to make coffee part of a social meeting. Sex is a guess. Amount of time that they have is a guess. So I start analyzing the potential customers for my business, and I start assigning characteristics to them. And that also allows me to do research, because there's incredible amounts of information out there through local libraries and databases, which says, if you're targeting a person that's 22 years old, here's what they do. Here's how they think. Here's what they look for. Here's how they spend money. And that may change your definition as you evolve your business plan of who you're going after, because your mission and the customer have got to come together. John, can you keep going? Interesting, Moxie Java in their business plan specifically says our customer is unpretentious. We are familiar, approachable, and for the everyday Joe and Joanne. So they have specifically taken their mission statement and linked it to a particular customer. And if you'll notice from that simple statement, it suggests an average age, an average education, an average income. That is who they are targeting. That is who they want to be important for. Keep going, John. So for Java Drone that we created, we're going to pick a specific customer. An active, busy customer who's special product conscious, knows better coffee from average coffee, is in the middle of an intensive career, is urban, and is probably a college graduate. So we picked that customer in our first iteration of defining the customer, who's going to buy the product. Okay, John. The third part of this, which follows rapidly, we fancily call value proposition. You will hear it called many things, but ultimately, it's probably the most important part of whether or not a business plan and a business succeeds. We call it value proposition. It's the why. All customers make choices on what and where to buy based on what matches their priorities best. Different customers make different choices. In the simplest terms, exactly what about the product you have set in mission and will be offering to the customer that you identified in customers will cause that customer to come to you. Dutch Brothers' statement is, we want to be the biggest drive-through coffee operation, and they're betting on the fact that a customer looking for coffee will get through double drive-throughs faster than a customer going to McDonald's, which only has one drive-through, even if it has two cash lanes, because that customer will not be waiting for another customer looking to buy a Big Mac. You can start to see, as you flesh these statements out, how they all come together and need to be consistent. In the value proposition, You must be able to convince potential customers that they must come to you in sufficient numbers and paying enough so that this can be a viable business. It is custom created for each business. I think as I've gone through this, you can see how the pieces of this come together once you put it in writing. Because once you put it in writing, you start to ask yourself questions. Will what I'm doing as the definition of the customer meet my mission statement? Will what I have identified as what makes me different, i.e. the 2 drive-throughs, okay? Will that be attractive to a customer group in enough numbers so that they will come to me as opposed to going to somebody else? Keep going, John. This is fleshing out what we just said a bit more with really specific 3 questions. The target customer identified before. Why should I, the target customer, give you my money for your product, not an alternative? Why should I give it for your coffee as opposed to going to someplace that's selling milkshakes? Why should I give you that much money? Is what you're pricing your business at a value for that target customer? And obviously, what is considered a price value for a 22-year-old customer just getting started in life is different than the price value for a 45 or 50-year-old customer who wants to have coffee in a convenient meeting place. And why should I, that customer, give you that much money to you instead of towards a competitor or an alternative solution? All of this involves doing some homework. So as you write it down, you test what you have written down against the marketplace. And if you come to us and you come to SCORE mentors and you're working on a business plan, these are the kinds of questions that we will ask you. And these are the kinds of questions that will form a test of whether or not in the end, we think you have a viable business that's worth spending money on and devoting time to. Keep going, John. Go back one. At the bottom, you adjust your business offerings so that you score better. And you can create spreadsheets, which we will look at, to help you evaluate whether or not what you are doing is going to rank you better against competition than what other people are doing. So you identify the product, you identify the customer, then you start to evaluate whether or not what you are doing is going to win in the marketplace. And just at the bottom, remember, lack of interest is a competitor. You have to have a product that you either have to create demand for or there is demand for in the marketplace, because you can have the greatest product that you think in the whole world, but if there's no interest in that product, you're not going to be successful as a business. Keep going, John. So back to the road to the value proposition. What business am I in? What are my capabilities? What am I going to do? I go back to the Dutch brothers. What are my capabilities? My capabilities are I have a double drive-through on my specialty operation. Then for whom do my customers and my capabilities have value by solving and addressing what we initially started with, solving a problem, meeting a need, or fulfilling a desire. And then who are my competitors? How am I differentiated from them? That's a path. So you can see that the 4 key elements of a business plan follow logically, one right after another, and they feed back to each other. As you work through them, you go back and you revise things you've done before. Keep going, John. How do you find out what matters? Well, first of all, most businesses are started, particularly small businesses, are started on somebody's gut. Somebody comes up with an idea because their stomach tells them they think there's a market for that product or a need for that product or service in the marketplace. That gut is often tested against experience, friends, partners. You talk about it. You go to the library, you do research. You look in the newspaper, although there are fewer newspapers these days. You do web research. Absolutely shamelessly shop competitors. Look at the things like what I showed you from the websites of other coffee companies and see what they say about what's important about what they're doing, and use that to compare yourself to what you think matters to customers. Customer surveys, I put in red a note. Yes, you can do customer surveys, but customer surveys before there is a product in the marketplace can be notoriously suspect, because you ask customers about something that doesn't yet exist. That the results of those kinds of questions and that kind of research can be problematic. You can do it, but the things that I've listed up above that are probably higher in terms of driving you where you want to go and figuring out what matters to the customer than just starting out with customer surveys. And then, of course, there's endless other possibilities of how to get that information. Keep going, John. Okay, so what I did was I took the 22-year-old and 45-year-old and said, on the things that we had identified as characteristics of what that customer was looking for, are there differences between a 22-year-old and a 45-year-old? And the answer is probably yes. Convenience and speed, the 22-year-old who's not looking for a meeting place probably wants to get the coffee faster and get on with their lives. The 45-year-old may be looking for a meeting place, a place to have coffee with friends or so forth. So convenience and speed of service may not be critical or as critical. Selection, specialized product. Again, the 22-year-old may have not have developed the taste for something exotic from Indonesia or someplace else like that. The 45-year-old may have. Quality is generally pretty even. Price, yeah, I would think there would be a difference in price sensitivity between those target customers. And then speed of service, seating, flexibility, ambiance. The 22-year-old may not care as much about how pretty the place is where they're having their specialty coffee or their meeting. Other food probably doesn't matter significantly to either of these categories in a specialty coffee operation. Because remember, we've started this out as a specialty coffee operation. So you start by plugging in some numbers like that, and those are helpful because they then take you back to what you established as the mission and the customer and the value proposition. And you say, gee, if I have a very slow specialty coffee operation, am I really going to be able to attract 22-year-olds who are in a hurry? Or if I have a specialty coffee operation with a $9 latte, is that really going to be attractive to the broad base of 22-year-olds? And you start to test what you've said you're going to do against the customer that you've identified. And you may, as you go through this, eliminate some customers and say, no, this is what I want to do. And it doesn't matter to me in the marketplace that this other customer doesn't find that attractive. I'm going to bet on the fact that there's enough of these other customers that I've got myself a business. So keep going, John. So if you want to, you can then create a spreadsheet that takes another step, okay? Which takes those characteristics that we just identified on the left-hand side for a customer and what we're guessing what matters. And then you take the companies that we identified and say, how do they do on all of this? Well, Starbucks doesn't rank at the top in terms of convenience and speed. Dutch Brothers does. And the company that we created, Java Drone, okay, there's no drive-through to go through. So it's possible that Java Drone could be the most convenient and the fastest coffee provider. And that's, of course, a speculation. If we were doing a business plan, that's how you'd evaluate whether or not you are going to succeed. So goodness, Java Drone could be incredibly important to someone that convenience and speed matter to. And then you go down through the list and you make guesstimates about whether what you're trying to do matters or is important to the particular customer that you're targeting. And remember, we did have a customer for Java Drone that we had identified. It was not, it was what you would call in euphemisms in marketing, a better customer. So seating, flexibility, and ambiance, Java Drone actually matches Starbucks because you get your coffee at your place. So you don't have to worry about the facility that you're going to, what it looks like and what it feels like. We're going to deliver coffee to your office. Starbucks is designed to feel better. Dutch Brothers doesn't care because it's just a drive-through. So you can start to fill in blanks and see how what you're putting together in a business plan, how the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle actually fit together. Keep going, John. So back to Java Drone. Based on the target customers that we identified for Java Drone, it scores higher than most of the competition on speed, convenience, and competitive price. And we'll come back to price in a little while. So Java Drone is in the game. So this business that we've created all of a sudden starts to look attractive as a specialty food business compared to the other specialty food coffee businesses that are out there. Another word about marketing that comes out of what you've identified as the customer and who the customer is and what matters to them. Value can only be defined from a customer's perspective. What words mean something real to a customer. So if you were in the cleaning business, you have a choice of saying, we use the new trioxyacetate cleaner, or you have a choice of saying, we get rid of pet smells or your money back. I'll let you all think about which statement would be more important to certain target customers. Or if you're in the service business, we're reliable. Is it better to say we're reliable or say we did 99.7% on-time rating in the last 12 months? Will that resonate with your target customer better that you've identified? Exceeding customer expectations for 32 years. Or we have 3,000 items in stock. There's a furniture company here in the Treasure Valley who, responding to what customers know is the problem in the supply chain of furniture and other things, they've produced advertising which says, we have your sofa in stock, get it today. We have your bed in stock, get it today. Those are both more meaningful than telling customers we have 3,000 items in stock. And in the current world, particularly as it relates to specialty food, you can either say we have no additional chemicals or a version of that, or you can say we're 100% organic certified. Then you can look back at your customer and say, which of these sentences is a customer going to relate to and convince them that they should come to me. But all of this ties together in that continuous chain of what is the mission? What are you trying to do? What is your business targeting to do? Who is the customer or customers in priority basis? 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes it's just one. Okay. What about what I'm offering is going to make that customer come to me and spend money with me? And how am I telling that customer and potential customers the value story that I have that is going to convince them to come to me and go on with the business? John? Okay, now we're going to get into the weeds. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on financial projections. Financial projections are by definition customized by business, and the detail that financial projections need will depend on the scope and size of the business, how much money you want to borrow, how you're going to pay it back, et cetera, et cetera. There are some basic, core, simple financial projections that businesses do. They are necessary for one incredibly simple reason. If you can't estimate that you are going to make money based on 1, 2, and 3, the mission isn't, you know what the mission is, you've identified the customers, you've figured out there's enough of them to generate substantial sales, you've figured out that your message, your value proposition is going to drive customers to you. If all of those don't produce a financial result which has a profit in it, you do not have a sustainable business. Now, we are talking about for-profit businesses. The business model piece of financial projections for not-for-profits is different. So I'm strictly addressing profitable businesses. What are the projected sales and expense numbers inappropriate to detail for your business, and they vary by business, that need to happen so that you can show this will be a financially viable activity? There are things that you can do, and we have seen them in SCORE, and we have clients that have hobbies that basically they run what you would call a business, but it's not a business which funds itself and is profitable so that it can go on and on and on and exist viably into the future. So there are alternatives, but if you want to have a financially viable business, at some point in time, when you go through these projections, in the bottom right-hand corner, there better be an adequate profit. And I will come back to that a little bit later when I boggle your minds with one of the upcoming slides. So let's go to the next slide, John. There are some basic financial statements, a profit and loss statement, which is the money that came in, the money went out, what got left. There is a balance sheet, which is usually more useful for businesses that have a lot of assets, inventory, buildings, and those kinds of things. Accounts payable is what it sounds like when you're doing a profit and loss statement. Do people owe me money? Do I have to pay people money that I have not written a check for? Because when you do profit and loss statements, you typically do them on a monthly basis. And sometimes all the money that you are due or all the money that you owe for what you did in the previous month, you haven't gotten the bills for them. So you create buckets called accounts payable and accounts receivable. You put those on the profit and loss statement So the profit and loss statement shows from a profit and loss standpoint, what really happened in that month or that quarter or that year. There are lots of ways to get this done. Spreadsheets is an easy way. There are lots of companies like QuickBooks and so forth that can help you do these kinds of things. It's not terribly difficult. It's like managing your own checkbook and creating your own budget for how much money you spend on a month on rent, how much you spend on a month on food, how much you spend as a month on gas. These are not significantly, the profit and loss statement is not significantly different from that. Is fairly easy to do. It's one of those things that for most businesses, a couple of hours with a SCORE mentor. And if you're familiar with Excel or those kinds of spreadsheets or QuickBooks, you can easily do. But it's absolutely critical that those be done. You will not be able to borrow any significant amount of money. You will not realistically be able to convince, like the potential investors in Shark Tank, if you can't project into the future based on your best guesses that came out of mission, customer, and value proposition, that you will make money doing it. You won't be able to get money. Small asterisk. And this is a word of caution on people investing in businesses. If you go to a bank and you do most of this, you may get a loan from a bank or a financial institution that is not based on the viability of your business. If you have assets to pledge that protect the bank or the financial institution, they take those into account. The people who are the tough love dispensers on evaluating profit and loss statements tend to be people like the mentors at SCORE and other business analysts who just look at the business freestanding and say, is the business paying its way? Or am I hedging my bet by saying if the business doesn't pay its way, the person who started the business started with money, and so I'm protected. So that's just a caution about doing these kinds of projections. For simple initial businesses that don't require a lot of capital, that aren't going to have a lot of equipment or a lot of inventory, these are pretty easy to do, and mentors and other people can help you do those kinds of things. Keep going, John. So this is the mind-boggling one, because you've got to have an example. What happened to the curtain, John? There we go. I just did, for your benefits, an example of a profit and loss statement. This one's a little bit more complicated in the following sense. You make a number of lines which are sales or revenue. So in this particular case, whatever this business was, product sales were 2.4 million, accessories were 589,000, delivery fees were 30,000. So the total income was $3 million in that month for that business. This is done for a retail business. In retailing businesses, you break out the cost of sales. In this case, the cost of the merchandise that was delivered to produce those sales of $3 million was $1.8 million. And then there's percentages that run alongside that. Because what you can do when you do research is you can find this information on public companies. So when you're doing your financial projections, you can test your financial projections against what is going on in the real world. So in this particular case, $3 million in income, which is obviously 100% of sales. Total cost of sales, 1.8 million, 59.8%, which leaves gross profit of 40.2%. Then you've got a bunch of things which said, what did we have to do in order to produce those $3 million of sales? And this, by the way, is based on, with numbers changed and names left out and unidentified, of one business that I've been associated with for 30 years. And it happens to be a retailer. So it comes from a real example. The categories on the left-hand side may change, but the way of doing this doesn't change. So $3 million in sales. We delivered $1.2 million worth of product. I'm sorry, 1.8 million of product. Gross profit was 1.2 million. Here's the expenses that it took. Took us $100,000 in warehouse and delivery wages. It took $112,000 in sales staff wages. It took $184,000 in administrative wages. And yes, these numbers include the taxes that had to have been paid out in order to do this. So these are all big picture numbers. So lo and behold, in August, in this scenario, we got $3 million plus in. $1.8 million is what product we had to deliver. It cost us $1 million to run the business. So at the end of the month, we had made a profit of $222,247, and that was 7.2% of sales. So that looks pretty good. Part of the reason for benchmarking these things against competition is you will see that over the course of time, profit numbers as a percentage of sales vary by business and by industry. There are low margin businesses and there are high margin businesses. When you test yourself against what your projections are, you need to test yourself against what is going on in the real world. What are the standards? Because when you do financial projections, these are the things that will be looked at very critically by lending institutions and investors. And generally speaking, if you want any reasonable amount of money, they are not shy about going out and looking at competition and saying, how are you going to stack up compared to the competition? You can see that in this scenario, August 2021 looked one heck of a lot better than August of 2020. And I won't go through the details. And again, I fudged some of the numbers for this example. But the point is, when you do financial projections, you have to end up with a profit number. If we had more time in this presentation, I could spend a few hours explaining why this matters and what numbers matter and so forth. But for the sake of this presentation, just remember, some projections are necessary. The more money you want from external resources or advisors, the more difficult. There was a question from Travis, is there a place to find profit and loss for similar companies to compare? The answer to that question is, if they're public companies, they produce quarterly results which have this kind of information in them. And you can get those through the libraries. Many of the libraries have access to information resources. The Boise, Maine Library has a business information section. They subscribe to all kinds of research documents, and you can call them and talk to them. It used to be when you went into the library, they would give you access to the databases so that if you were starting, again, a coffee chain, you could go in and look at Starbucks numbers. You could go in and look at things that are comparable to what you're trying to do. So the answer is yes, this information, if there are public companies that are doing this, is available. If there aren't, you try and come close to something that looks like what you're trying to do, because usually there is or are public companies that come close that you can use as a model. What I said earlier was I could spend much more time going on the detail of whether that 7.2% was good, bad, or indifferent. It varies by industry and business for a whole lot of reasons. There are industries where low margin is okay, and it's because the risk of running at that low margin is low, and the low margin is still a lot of dollars. So investors are willing to take the risk. And there are industries where there's high risk to the investment. So you can't run a business so close to the edge so that if you have one burp, all of your risk in your business is lost. So these numbers and where they need to be and where they end up being vary by business. The last, probably most important thing about this, which you can see on here, is you do year-on-year comparisons. Again, easy to do with spreadsheets and QuickBooks because you look at trends of various numbers. Once you establish a business, you're not managing a lot of the detail exactly the way you did when you started. You may have employees managing it. And what you do is you look at the comparable numbers. So in this particular case, you look at postage, well, look at employer payroll expenses. And what you see is this year, the employer payroll expenses were 1.2% of sales. Last year, they were 1.3%. So whatever the company was doing, it reduced the employer payroll expense by 1/10%. And that 1/10% went straight down to the 7.2. And you can see how those things happen. The staff wages were lower than they were the previous year. And you can see where the pieces of the increase from 3.2 to 7.2 came from. And similarly, when you do projections out into the future, you look at those kinds of things and you say, oh my goodness, my rent is going up, so my profit is going to decline. And if my profit is going to decline, where do I make that up? And that's an essential ingredient of managing projections and managing profit and loss in financial statements. For small to medium-sized businesses, these are not terribly complex. They are not hard to do. There is lots of help for how to do this. Either do it yourself through checkbooks, through spreadsheets, or software companies like QuickBooks. And I'm not recommending QuickBooks. I'm just using it as a name. There are lots of choices on how to do this. But this is the fourth element. If you can't take the first three things that you've done and with reasonable assumptions, do a projection for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months out, which produces that positive number in that second column at the bottom, you do not have a viable business. And what you have to do is you have to go back to the drawing boards and say, what do I have to change in order to make this work? John? Remember earlier I said Java Drone can be price and financially competitive. Java Drone can offer the same coffee that Starbucks charges $7 for much less money. So they can be competitive as a specialty food business with a Starbucks for a lot less money. Well, why is that? Well, if you're going to originate coffee by drone, it doesn't have to be from a retail store. It can be from a warehouse. Warehouse rent is much cheaper than retail rent. You as the customer have no driving costs, so you save money. There's labor efficiency. If it's being produced in a warehouse, you don't have to pay somebody to clean the store. You don't have to manage restrooms for employees. You can do the most efficient online ordering and payment that can possibly be done, because that's the only way the customer can order it. So you don't have to worry about taking any cash or doing anything else in the store. So Java Drone can save a lot of money on the expense side, which means if they really can exist as a business, they can deliver specialty coffee to your home or your office for a lower price than you can get it elsewhere. So it's an interesting business idea and a business concept. But it's an example of how when you write down the mission, the customer, and the value proposition, that sometimes you get serendipity in the profit and loss statement. Because what you've made as your assumptions of what you're going to do and what it's going to take to deliver it in the financial projections produce a wonderful result. It does happen. But you have to go through all 4 of those steps to create a viable business plan. And we, most of the time in SCORE, strongly suggest that before people spend money in investing in doing something, buying a bunch of inventory, doing a lot of things, that they take these business plan steps to see if it makes sense. We do get people who come and see us who've spent money and they're wondering why they're not making money. And then when we peel it back, we find out that they did not do a good job on the business plan. They either didn't identify a good mission, or they didn't pick the right customers, or they didn't have the right value proposition. And the net result is they were in trouble. Whereas if they had taken their ideas, put them down in writing, maybe made a couple of samples to test to see if it could work, but focused on doing a viable business plan and having it vetted by somebody who looks at those kinds of things and looks at the financial projections, they would have saved themselves a lot of time and grief. And if you're going to need money to do it, you're going to need all 4 of these steps to present to a financial institution or an investor or Shark Tank, okay, in order to convince them to give you money. John? So Java Drone wins. So the business we decided to start an hour ago, okay, is a viable specialty food business. And so you say to yourself, well, is this insane or is this real? Is this just a fantasy? John? Believe it or not, donuts in flight and first US approved drone delivery. The Federal Aviation Administration has in the past approved tests for people looking at doing drone delivery of foods. And this actually happened, okay, from a 7-Eleven. I think it was in Utah. A chicken sandwich, hot coffee, and donuts were delivered by drone in a hot and cold delivery package, Reno, Nevada. So whether or not everyone thinks it's a fantasy, there are a lot of things we thought were a fantasy a few years ago, okay, that are probably going to happen. There are 4 current, well-funded vertical takeoff and landing airplane entities operated by batteries that are in development that you will probably see in your neighborhood 5 years from now. This is not an altogether fantasy, okay? It's just an interesting example of how to think outside the box on a specialty food business. But you do not have to go this far on a specialty food business. You can apply these same principles to some of the kinds of questions that I've seen people address about their farms and so forth and so on. So I'm done and I'm going to stop right here. I think Carrie wants me to see if there are any questions for.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. That was very informative. Any questions? You can either type them in the chat, or if you just want to unmute and we can have a conversation. That was a lot of information. So yeah, feel free to go ahead and engage with any questions you might have.
On my sales pitch, I will just reiterate, SCORE's value proposition is, at least in the Treasure Valley, as an example of the national, we have 35 mentors with over 1,200 years of varied business experience in industries, farming, food, all kinds of things. They are ready and available to be contacted, for you all to reach out to them and ask specific questions and set up mentoring sessions. That's what we do, which is different. Most of those mentoring sessions and time are free. So, and there is no such thing as a stupid question when you're starting a business.
That's right. So if you,
yeah.
Andy, let's give them a minute, see if anyone wants to speak up with any questions, or type into the chat if you're more comfortable with that. All right, one of the questions, is there a good way to estimate the volume of business you can reasonably expect on a very small scale before you start? I've never been able to bridge the gap between a business plan and reality when starting.
The answer is you sit down with an appropriate mentor and you look at estimates. You do guesses. There is a surefire method that works to determine whether or not you should do it. And that surefire method is to start at the back side, which says, if I wanted this to be a reasonable business, if I wanted to make $50,000 a year doing it, for example, how much business would I have to do that? And then you work backwards and say, the expenses of the business would be roughly XYZ. I'd have to pay this much in rent. I'd have to pay this much in lights. My materials would cost me this much. And you back into the volume necessary to do that. And quite often what people find out, if they couldn't do it from the front side and they sit down with a mentor and they do it from the back side, they come out and say, oh my God, in order for me to make this a business and have $25,000 left over at the end of the year, and for me to make $50,000, I would have to sell 3,000 pieces at $6 each. And your stomach then tells you whether that's realistic or reasonable or not. So you can approach it from both directions, sit down with a mentor and build it up from scratch based on best information, or sit down and go at it from the back end and find out there's no way that I can make that number work because it just doesn't work. And I can do it as a hobby and I'll make $10,000 or $15,000 a year, because that way I know I can sell 200 or 300, but I don't invest $100,000 to try and do that. So you can work it from both ends.
Thanks, Andy. Any other questions? Okay, well, feel free as they come up to place them in the chat. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break and let our brains process all of that. So come back here. It's about 2, so come back at 2:05. John, does that give you enough time?
Absolutely.
Okay. So yeah, be back, go get your coffee, your tea, and come back for social media, online marketing success strategies.
I'm gonna hit pause.
Thanks.
Yeah, we keep each other honest here. Well, I thought Andy did a really good job of explaining some things that can be a little intimidating. So I hope everybody enjoyed that part. What I have the honor of doing to kind of close us out is to talk a little bit about marketing, which is, and I noticed this, it kind of jumped out to me on Andy's profit and loss statement, was an expense line for advertising. And in my over 20 years of experience in marketing, this is one area that I think a lot of new business owners kind of forget, is to factor in what is actually going to be some activities on marketing. And what I'm going to do in the next few slides is kind of really break it down into fives. I call this my 5 steps of online marketing success. And one of them, especially now since a lot of focus has been with the with the pandemic, a lot of businesses have had to pivot to a more of an online presence. And one of the things that in my 5 steps here is the first one is to actually make sure that when you do develop your business plan and that you are putting together all the tools you'll need, is that number one, you can be found when people search for you online. Unfortunately, unlike Starbucks and Dutch Bros and some of the others out there that Andy referred to, name recognition is something that you build over time. And for most of us, having folks go on to Google, do a search, is how most people find their local businesses. So the first step for online marketing success is to be found online. Can your customers find you? The second step, and I'll put all this together, is in staying in touch with your current customers and gaining new customers. So part of your advertising budget should go into these kinds of activities. And number 3 would be to create a plan to generate repeat business. So how do you get people to come back once they have experienced Dravajone? What's going to get them to order with you again, rather than go to a competitor or go to someone else? So that is the 3rd step. The 4th step is to encourage interaction. And when you're talking about online marketing, this is actually a huge piece, because one of the ways that we kind of get the word out and taking a old school term and kind of modernizing it is by word of mouth. So online has become the new word of mouth. So what are you doing online to generate interaction and encouraging people to interact with you on Facebook? If you have a Facebook presence, LinkedIn, how are you going to get the word out, encourage interaction, and then spread the word amongst your ideal customer? And then, of course, the 5th step in online marketing success is, how do you measure success? So, are you meeting your sales goals? Are you meeting your, for example, your online goals? Do you have an audience on Facebook? Do you have a significant number of visitors to your website, which then help drive customers through the door? So there are lots of things to measure, not only from, your kind of starting, but as you're going through the process of making your business more visible. So those are the 5 steps that I call my steps to online marketing. And then, of course, there are also 5 tools that can really help you develop a good online presence. The first one being, is your website mobile friendly or is it mobile responsive? And what that means is when I go to your website, not only on the desktop, but if I go to it on my phone, will I have a good experience? Will I be able to see everything on my screen, no matter if I'm doing it on a phone, a tablet, or desktop? Am I going to present a great online experience for my customers and potential customers? The second tool that I would incorporate into my tools for online success would be to have a good email marketing tool. And email marketing, although not as sexy as some of the other tools like social media, video, email marketing by far is the #1 channel that generates the most revenue for businesses. And coming up on the holidays, you're probably going to see an increase in the emails that you receive coming from businesses and retailers, because this is how sales are generated for the most part when you're talking about your online presence. So having a good email marketing tool, like for example, some of the big ones out there are MailChimp, Constant Contact. There's a whole industry when it comes to email marketing tools out there. And then of course, the third tool that I would incorporate into my planning and execution would be to have a primary social media channel. And for most businesses, and in particularly the food industry, having a Facebook presence and an Instagram presence, and of course, Instagram is owned by Facebook. These are where most of our customers are probably going to be found. Facebook has over 1 billion online users. So I am sure that no matter what niche or what business you decide to get into, or you already are in, your customers by and far can be found on Facebook. And Facebook has a lot of tools to help you do that. Online advertising, Facebook ads, just having a presence on Facebook, and some of the other marketing or some of the other social media platforms definitely help you establish what we call an online community. And that online community can then help get the word out about your product. So having a primary social media channel is key. And then of course, the fourth one is keeping updated business listings online. For example, most food industry businesses have a Yelp presence. So you want to be able to have a Yelp presence or a Google review presence where people can actually submit reviews. And that helps in getting the word out as people are reading reviews about your restaurant, your food truck, whatever it is that you're selling, to get opinions from others. Over 60% of online decisions are made with the help of reviews. So if I'm buying, or if I'm looking to buy for a particular, if I want to go to a restaurant, I'm going to go to Yelp to see what are the reviews there. And if I have if they're good reviews, then I'm more likely to engage with that business. Now, as a business owner, we always kind of think of Yelp or some of the other review sites in kind of a negative connotation, because that's where people can actually leave bad reviews. So how do you handle that? And of course, keeping your credibility and your responsiveness in that area is important. and replying to good reviews as well as bad reviews. Just give people an insight into how you run your business. So keeping your business listings up on Yelp, Google My Business is becoming more popular now, and they're adding more tools to help promote your business through Google searches. Angie's List, there are lots of different reviews sites out there that can help you maintain a good presence. And then, of course, the fifth tool is what kind of content are you going to produce to help bring people into your business and to actually deliver on your promise from your value proposition. So am I providing good information about my product or service that I am putting out there? And then how am I doing that? Am I using blogs, for example? Am I posting regularly on Facebook and social media? These are all things that we think of and ways to do that. Video is very popular, an easy way to showcase your product or service and to let people in on what you're doing. Again, like I said, writing blog posts that are posted on your website that can give people a text version of what your business is about. A lot of times we use blogs or blog posts to answer questions and inform our audience about what we're doing. So these are the 5 tools that we work with our clients with when we're talking about how do you best go about reaching new customers, staying in touch with current customers, and then measuring the success of all of that. And I put this all together in kind of what we call a customer journey. And when you think of Andy's example of Starbucks, and I'll use this in my example, one of the things that we think about when we think about Starbucks, yes, coffee as a commodity out there. I can make a cup of coffee at home for less than $1. So what is it that's bringing all of us out there to go to Starbucks and pay $5 or more for a drink? And for a lot of that is driven by what we call providing a wow experience. And one of the things that I think about when I go to Starbucks, when it comes to that wow experience, because they're all kind of locally focused, a lot of times when I go in, and if I'm a regular, I can talk to the barista and they know what I'm ordering, or they are familiar with me because I've been there before. So they're providing a really good customer experience that I can't get anywhere else. So when you think about your own company, what kind of wow experience do you plan to provide your customers? Because I can get coffee at any of the other examples that Andy talked about. And in the Drava drone case, how cool is it to have coffee actually delivered to you? So if that drone dropping the coffee off near where I can get it at my house that I don't have to travel to, then that is an awesome wow experience. So when we take that wow experience, we can turn that into how do we entice people to stay in touch with us? Are we asking them to join us on our Facebook page, to follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter? Are we engaging with them and keeping in touch with them through email marketing or on YouTube using videos? Are we doing advertising to entice them to stay in touch? And then once we have gotten them interested and engaged in our business, then we can continue to nurture that relationship through an ongoing engagement. And that's where social media is key. And in your own experience, the companies and the businesses that you frequent and partake in, this is important because you'll always see some type of communication outside of just you purchasing that product or service and then going about your business. So there's always this constant, what I call staying top of mind with your audience in getting them to re-engage or to engage with your business. And then once we've got that engagement, we can actually drive what we call social visibility. And social visibility in the examples that I've given, like for example, if I see a Facebook post from your business on my Facebook feed, and I see people that have commented or shared their experience with your business on your Facebook page or your Facebook post, that just further drives credibility so that others who may be seeing that same post can say, oh, that's a business that Andy frequented and he liked it. So that may be something, that may be a business I want to spend my money at. So driving social visibility is key to that social engagement. And it's also part of that wow experience that I remember or that someone else has shared with me. So bringing that social visibility back actually helps increase my online exposure, further expands that word of mouth, because now that great wow experience that they are having is actually being fed out to their network of friends and followers. And then of course, then that brings you back into turning that prospect into a paying customer. So that is kind of what we call our cycle of social media engagement when it comes to marketing your business. So just to a quick review, just getting people in the door is one thing. And when I say door, that could be an online presence or it could be a physical presence. And then providing that wow experience for them that will keep you top of mind and that they will say, you know what, it's worth it for me to buy a $5 cup of coffee from this business because I have a really good experience when I go there. And then I keep in touch with those customers. I engage with them. I get them to share their experience with others, and that increases visibility. And then, of course, brings more and new potential customers back into our business cycle. So that is all that I have, although that is a very short and very high level way of doing it. One of the things that I have the great honor and privilege of doing and working with SCORE is that I do monthly, if not sometimes weekly, webinars on digital marketing and all the things that we talk about here. So if you're looking for more info, please check out the SCORE website. And I'm sure other presentations that are being done at your university are going to be well worth your time. So I appreciate your time and attention on this, and I will turn it back over to Andy to close us out.
Okay, just a couple of things that John prompted me while he was talking about. One is, I know that a number of people in the audience have farms and are looking at business to business expansion. If you talk to a mentor, myself or other people, we'd be happy to talk to you about how the verbiage that we've given you applies to business relationships in 2021. Having the value proposition, having identified the customers and those kinds of things do apply in the current world if you want to have a sustainable, ongoing relationship with a business to business customer just like it does with retail customers. So it's not just a driving down the street opportunity kind of thing. But probably more importantly, there has been a sea change in the last 5 years. I'm an oldster. I've been doing this for a long time, so I can talk about changes. What John was referring to was um, 5 years ago, a lot of marketing was set it and forget it. Those of us who are old enough remember the yellow pages where you would produce an ad in September and that ad stayed in the yellow page phone book for a year. And you didn't have to do much, okay? What you and your competitors did was fixed. The same story was told for a year and you didn't do anything with it. The change that electronic marketing and social media have made is marketing is currently live and interactive. There is no set it and forget it. You cannot not pay attention to the communication, to the relationship that you have with customers on a week. You must do it on a weekly or a monthly basis. Nothing drives me crazier, going back to what John says, than going out to a website and the information on the website for that person is a year old. And you can tell. You can tell when they've copyrighted it. You can tell on the content. What the Googles and the Facebooks and others of the world and the Amazons have done is they've made continuing communication with customers, whether it's business to business or to retail customers, necessary. You have to update your information, your communication with your customers regularly. What impact that has for businesses is businesses need to have someone or some portion of their weekly and monthly activities dedicated to marketing. Again, you used to be able to outsource it. You used to be able to do it once a year, set it and forget it, create your mailing package, and then just put it in place and not deal with it. That world has changed. You have to be interactive. You have to be active. You have to figure out what that means for your business. And then you have to invest time and energy and money in doing that. If you don't, you will not be able to achieve and maintain top of mind and an important role, position in your customers' process for buying things. And that's been a sea change, which has only accelerated in speed in the last couple of years. So doing what I said in summary is important, but that does have to be married to downstream a commitment on the part of the business to marketing this information continuously, freshly, urgently, or you will lose your position in the marketplace and you will not achieve your financial objectives. So I'm done.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Andy and John. Thanks for helping us get our heads around the level of planning and ways of thinking through who our customers are and our value propositions. And also on the marketing end, which John's talk was a great complement to what will be in one of our other sessions. I'm just going to pull up my screen here. Share screen, go. So you can see coming up our next webinars as part of this 4 class series that we have next week, food safety and licensing, then labeling and ingredient analysis, and then we'll come back around to the conversations around marketing, and have some sort of additions to what John has shared with us. So in conclusion, we would love if you took our post-webinar survey. Jen's also going to send this out in an email, but if you're savvy and want to go ahead and scan the QR code or the code, you can do that now. Otherwise, are there any questions for us as coordinators, facilitators, for John, Andy? Now's a great time. You've got us all here. If your minds aren't completely mushed by now, mine feels a little mushy.
You can also email some questions. We're happy to do that too. And if you do have a cell phone, you can use your picture feature and just scan that code on your screen, and it'll take you directly to the website through your smartphone. But I also typed in the survey. We do need a survey. Our funders do appreciate hearing back from us and the outcomes of our educational offerings. So we appreciate it so much. I want to thank you guys so much for joining us today. Really appreciate all the speakers and you taking time to spend the afternoon with us.
Yeah, thanks, Andy and John. We really, really appreciate it. So
Thank you.
taking the time and putting together the presentations, and much appreciated. All right, so that concludes our first session here. That was really exciting. Thank you all, and yeah, be in touch.
Thanks.
Thank you.